Oh, I have a question in the Old Testament. How bad was the famine in the land of Canaan when Joseph was in Egypt and the ruler of Egypt? How bad did it get? Do you think we have a famine here in America along with record inflation and other crises taking place?
Well, no, there's no doubt we got problems in America. We have the worst inflation since 1946, I believe it is the latest stats on that. And of course, if you go to buy a house, you know, the interest rates are crazy. Everybody notices this insane economy we're in right now. Any politician that says how good the economy is doing is simply lying because they have to keep borrowing trillions of dollars to just make the economy work. If the economy was so good, you would be putting in $1.7 trillion a year instead of borrowing $1.7 trillion a year to make a failing economy work. That's bottom line. That's facts. And so when I see this, I have to realize that we're in a time of turmoil in our own nation. Now, when we go back to Israel, how bad was the famine? I think it was pretty bad, and here's why. Because we find that Jacob was willing to send his sons to Egypt, which was a very perilous journey. There were not only the perils of just going through the desert, but there was also the perils of robbers and other things. And to send them on a perilous journey to get food would indicate to me, in some level, the severity of it. Now, again, word was known that there was food in Egypt, and the reason why was because Joseph interpreted a dream that Pharaoh had concerning the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. The Pharaoh immediately promoted Joseph from prison to second in command in the nation of Egypt in a day. And I always tell people, don't ever forget what can happen in a day. Sometimes we think it's always going to be this way. It's never going to change. It's always going to be. I imagined probably Joseph felt the same way. But then one day it all changed. And the plan of God was manifested in his life. Remember, God's got a plan for all of us. And what requires us to stay in the saddle for that plan is faith. And so I think the famine was extreme. And I think this is why we find taking this perilous journey. Your thoughts?
Well, I do know from Genesis chapter 41, when you go back and you look at the interpretation of that dream, that Joseph told the Pharaoh there that the famine was going to be severe. And there was the fear of the land being, as he says here, completely depleted of all of its resources. And the only way to survive was to store up for those 7 lean years. You move on to Genesis chapter 42, as Mike mentioned, and Jacob is sending his sons there. And the reason why, he says, is that we may live and not die. So there was this, if we don't get some food, we are going to die. So the famine, it was severe, and it would deplete the land of its resources. And Jacob was fearful that they would potentially lose their lives. Thus, it was severe, to say the least, Mike. And Joseph was there to preserve. And so interesting about that whole thing is Joseph, as you go on in that story, Joseph realizes, as he comes to the realization as his brothers return, that he was there to preserve life and open the storehouses so that people could be fed in the midst of famine. I think Joseph serves as a beautiful picture, a type of Jesus, in that he is our Savior. I mean, he's a picture of it. He is not Jesus in the Old Testament, but I would say a type, a picture. And we're in this famine in this world, and he opens up the storehouses, and he has a supply that we know nothing of, and he just asks us to come to him. And I love the story of Joseph. There's so many great insights there, but to answer the question simply, it was a very severe famine.